organization, and at the same time, 2020. Do we have a motion?
Yeah, I'll move to approve the minutes.
Remember to please state
I'll
your
second.
name. Please state your name and then what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I have Peter Capano and then Andrew Haddock as the second.
Is that okay with everyone? And remember, if you're not going to talk, please mute yourself so we don't have too much feedback. All right, are we ready for the roll call, Jeff?
I believe so.
All right, I have from Auburn, Bill Herman.
Yes, I'm here and I abstain.
From Bedford, Bill DeShecco.
I'm here. 4.
Also Bedford, Charlie Fairman.
Here and abstain.
Bill Jean from Bedford.
Here and abstain.
Barbara Salvatore, Bedford.
Here and say yes.
Candia, we have Dick Snow.
Dick Snow, yes.
And we have Al Hall at the,
Al Hall abstains.
thank you. From Chester, Andrew Haddock.
Andrew Haddock, yes.
Did I miss Deb Munson?
Yes.
Oh,
Deb
I
Munson,
did.
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, Deb.
Hi.
And Sylvia, you missed Brian Lord from Bedford too.
Sorry. Thank you. Keeping me on my toes. Sorry, Brian. Brian Lord, Bedford.
I'm here. Yes. Thanks, Pete. Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Uh-oh, I have another person coming in. We have Cutler Brown coming in. All right, he'll be joining. Let's see, thank you for that. And that's what I need exactly from everyone to keep me on my toes and correct me. So from Deerfield, I've got Bob.
Yes.
Cody. Thank you. Did I miss Fred?
I don't think he's here.
All right, thank you. From Derry, I've got Jeff Moulton.
Here and yes.
And I've got John O'Connor.
Here and yes.
All right, is that it from Derry? All right, we'll move to Francistown. Alfred Eisenberg.
Here and yes. Am I muted?
Thank you. Thank you. And Patrick.
Present and I abstain.
Okay, great. From Goffstown, I've just got Dave Pierce.
Yes, on the vote.
All right, anyone else from Goffstown that I missed? Seeing none. Hooksett, we've got Cutler Brown who just joined us. Hi, Cutler.
Hi.
And we're working on the minutes, so a yay, nay, abstain,
Yay.
yay. Mark Shannon.
Here, yes.
Thank you, Mark. Londonderry, Suzanne Brunel.
Sorry, I'm present. I have to abstain.
All right, thank you. Deb Levins with her bugs.
Present and yes on the minutes.
Okay. And Art Rugg.
I am present and yes on the minutes.
Okay, great. And just a shout out to Martin, and we all are rooting for him to return to good health. So just a little mention of that. Manchester, Peter Capano.
I am present and yes on the minutes.
Thank you. And Dan O'Neill.
Present and abstain.
Thanks, Dan. And we're going to jump to Ware with Tom. You're muted, Tom.
I'm present and I abstain.
Thanks, Tom. And Wyndham, Peter Griffin.
Yes on the minutes.
Thank you. And we also have Mike Witten from MTA.
I'm here. I vote yes.
And anyone from DOT that I missed?
Yes, I am here, Linda Dusenberry, and I abstain.
All right, Linda, thank you. Any other voting member that I may have missed? Okay, that looks good.
So any old business, Sylvia?
I don't believe so. Linda, correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm not aware of any.
Okay. So moving on to new business, the first item is the public participation plan. Carl, you want to lead us off?
Yes, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Good.
All right, cool. Just need to make sure. Yeah, back in June, we presented to you our draft public participation plan. And just a reminder, this is another requirement, a federal requirement for us to review, put together, update. And this year is certainly an appropriate year to do so with all the new, well, not new technology, but the use of technology. So real quickly, I'm going to just share my screen and go over. We just concluded a 45, let's see, oh my goodness, here it is. 45-day public comment period. All right, how's this look?
Good.
Okay, let me just move you guys out of my way here. Make sure I'm in the right place. Yeah, here we go. So yeah, this plan is quite a bit more robust than our previous plans. And really, these are the 4 goals we set out early on, really about improving access for the public to engage in our transportation planning program. A big one is building on our existing relationships, old and new, meaning like working with other partners, other local groups that work more directly with immigrant communities, for example, Easter seals, things like that. Ensuring a diverse and equitable public involvement strategy throughout and increasing the visibility and frequency of our engagement. So these are the 4 broad goals, but there's quite a bit more to it, which I'm going to go into. Also, just want to remind you all that that this is a living document. We're going to update it every so often. And right now, we're, as I said, concluding the 45-day comment period. Went from July 6th until August 21st. We're looking for adoption today. The TAC unanimously recommends adoption. Real quickly, therefore, I will just go through some of the comments that we heard. I just covered this. It's on our website, and any additional comments or ideas can go to me or Monique. Monique's not in the meeting today. She's out sick. And this is our public hearing. So there's about 6 of these slides with a summary of comments, and I'm just going to go through them real quickly. Incorporate into the content of Appendix A into the main document, as well as Appendix E. These are appendices about how we do things, I believe, just instead of making them separate. They're within the one document, but they were at the end. Add some heading and subheading numbers throughout to make it a little bit more navigable from the table of contents. And we concur with these comments and have edited the document accordingly. Manchester UZA coordination, just to translate that a little bit, the urbanized area of Manchester, some of you will recall, extends beyond the member towns of SNHPC, and it also includes the urbanized areas of Allenstown, Bow, and Pembroke. And so we coordinate with Central New Hampshire Regional Planning Commission in Concord that covers those towns, among many others, on transportation project level and planning level efforts. And so we need to just state in the document that we will, that we do this, something we already do, and that we will coordinate our public outreach efforts across the entire Manchester UZA, not just within the towns that SNHPC has members within. And so we concur with this comment and have edited the document accordingly, and we'll proceed in that fashion. Performance measures. You guys hear this all the time. It's relatively new as far as incorporating into documents. Federal Highway's has been important for almost a decade now, but now we're really starting to incorporate more performance measures in everything that we do. This one, however, was about a performance measure that we included. They should be, the comment was that they should be easily quantifiable with minimal subjectivity. And I guess the measure that we had was to produce informative, effective, and user-friendly materials, et cetera. Determined that's a pretty subjective and difficult to quantify, just a little bit too vague. And so, you know, this is a case where we're just not going to include that type of a performance measure because it's too difficult to do anything with. So recommended responses, we concur with the comment, and we'll remove this performance measure. A big piece of what we need to do in this day and age is translation and interpretive services. The comment suggested adding information to the plan about how SNHPC will facilitate translation services for persons with limited English proficiency, interpretive services for deaf, hard of hearing, and blind persons when needed. Again, this was a comment we're going to move forward with, and we've outlined how we do this. It just wasn't, it's something that was in, we have instructions on and we have access to the information, but wasn't in the document explicitly. So we concur with the comment and note that Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission will utilize the following resources explicitly: Language Bank, Northeast Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services, Future and Sight, for a variety of services to help those who can't communicate either verbally or with English language. And this is I believe this is a federal, if not state, requirement. Summary table. So we communicate in quite a bit of different ways with 6, 7, 8 different types of documents. And I'll show you that we had a spreadsheet coming up, shows you everything we do. So it was asked of us that we incorporate a summary of how SNHPC employs all the different public involvement strategies for each of these different MPO planning products. Again, our response concur with the comment, makes perfect sense, and we have edited the document accordingly and added this table, which may be a little bit difficult to see, but I'll give you a real quick overview. On the left are the different MPO planning products that we're required to do. TOPS is Long Range Plan, the TIP, Transportation Improvement Program, you're all familiar with, Congestion Management Process, Unified Planning Work Program, our internal budgeting and planning program, ITS, Intelligent Transportation Systems, this Public Participation Plan, and then Title VI and Environmental Justice, and then the MPO Prospectus, which you're going to hear more about at the end of that's one of the things on the agenda today. The next column talks about the different days for public comment, length of time for public comment period. And then across the top are all the different public participation strategies that we use. Everything from traditional newspaper notices, public hearings, and formal meetings, through ad hoc committees, public forums and workshops, survey instruments, and then kind of more of the new technology, new media, website postings, newsletter, e-newsletter, media blasts, things on social media, Facebook, Twitter, etc., and visualization techniques, which really is talking about things done with computer technology mostly. So that's kind of the toolbox of the way that we do public participation and the different products we have. The difference between the green and the blue: the green are strategies that should always be employed for those types of products, and the blue are strategies that should sometimes be employed, meaning it'll be appropriate sometimes, and other times it may just not work or be appropriate in a broader sense. This has been incorporated into the document as well. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, just last week, TAC unanimously recommended adoption of this public participation plan with the edits and recommendations from public comments that I've gone over. And again, this is the final slide. What we're asking for you to do today is provide any additional comments, discussion, and then formal adoption of the public participation plan with these additions and edits. And that's what I have for you.
Any questions from the commission? I had one question for you, Carl. Great overview. Thank you for that. I was wondering, I understand about the performance measures, that they're not measurable, but they certainly looked like really valid goals to something to strive for. And I wonder, instead of just hopefully they haven't been deleted, but just sort of incorporated into goals or, objective, something like that.
I don't believe performance measures have been removed categorically. I think it was just that one.
Yeah.
But again, here's my take on performance measures. This is, that's forward-looking. They are suggestions for what we're going to be paying attention to when we go to quantify what we've done as far as public participation. And if it's included in the plan, I think it's more of something that we have to do. It's something we could strive to do just the same. We could that one that's been removed, we could try and come up with some kind of a report on those aspects. But it just was determined that it would be too difficult to actually quantify and provide meaningful quantification of that performance measure. And so therefore it should be dropped. That's my take on it.
Yeah, no, it wasn't so much as to, keep it as a performance measure, but just to keep it as a goal.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to go back to it here for a
Is
second.
Al saying something?
Yes. Al, I believe, is moving to adopt the public participation plan. Thank you, Al.
Peter Griffin will second.
Roll call.
All right. Bill from Auburn.
Can we clarify that Al's motion is to accept it with the changes?
That is
Good idea.
correct, Al.
Correct.
With the recommended edits. that we just- Correct, Bill.
I vote yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Bedford, let's start with Brian Lord.
Yes, as amended.
Bill DeShaco.
Yes.
Charlie.
Yes.
Bill Jean.
Yes.
Barbara.
Yes.
Candia. Al. Okay, Dick Snow.
Aye.
Chester, we have Andrew.
Aye.
Deb.
Yes.
Deerfield, Bob.
Yes.
Derry, Jeff.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Francistown, we have Alfred
Yes.
and Patrick.
Yes.
Goffstown, we have David.
Vote yes.
Thank you. Hooksett, we have Cutler
Yes.
and Mark.
Yes.
Londonderry, we have Suzanne.
Yes.
Deborah.
Yes.
Arthur.
Yes.
And Manchester, we have Peter
Yes.
Yes.
and Dan.
Dan O'Neill, yes.
Thank you, Dan. And Ware, we have Tom.
Yes.
And Wyndham, Peter Griffin.
Yes.
Oh, and MPO, let's see, DOT, we have Linda
Yes.
and Mike Whitten, MTA.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, next item is the draft Title VI program review. Nate, you're up.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. This is the hardest part of the day for me to try to figure out how to properly share my screen. How's this? Can everyone see a PowerPoint? Maybe.
Yes.
You can all see a PowerPoint that says Title VI and Environmental Justice Program Update?
Yes.
In full
Yeah.
screen form?
No.
No.
Yes, it's in the full screen.
All right. I think I've got to drag it over here.
Open the PowerPoint presentation first.
Yeah, it is open.
It was full screen, Nate. You just didn't have it in presentation mode.
Presentation, but then pick the window.
Is it full screen now?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I'm just going to go over for the next few minutes our proposed update to our Title VI and Environmental Justice Program. And when we're talking about Title VI means Civil Rights Act. So we have responsibilities under civil rights regulations at the federal level that we need to always meet. And so we have a written Title VI program for that purpose. The DOT advises that all MPOs Title VI programs should be updated every 3 years. So our last update of the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission's Title VI program was back in December of 2017. So some of you who have been on the commission for a few years may remember the last time that we adopted our Title VI program, but it was back in December of 2017. And periodically, our partners, sometimes at the state level, sometimes at the federal level, review Title VI programs. And so earlier this year, the New Hampshire DOT's Bureau of Rail and Transit brought a consultant in who's an expert in Title VI programs called RLS and Associates. And they did a review of Title VI programs across the state, including ours. And they made some recommendations to us from their review. And I'll walk through what those are. But first, just as a note to everyone, as you saw in your staff report and in your meeting packet today, we have released our draft Title VI program for public comment. It was released for public comment on August 17th. We've got a 30-day comment period that we are in the middle of right now. That comment period will will end on September 17th, 2020. So if anybody has any comments on the draft Title VI program, we welcome those at any time. They can be sent by regular mail to us at the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission office at 438 Dubuque Street in Manchester, or it may be easier to send those by email to me, nmiller@snhpc.org. And again, we'll welcome any comments that we receive until September 17th. So at our September meeting, there will be a public hearing to consider adoption of our updated Title VI program. So that's September 22nd. That'll be one of our only business items before our main speaker, Steve Taylor, does his presentation at the September 22nd meeting. So we'll have that as a brief item of business in September. So what were the recommendations that came out of our Title VI program review? There's a handful of them on this slide. So one of them was to remove any references to age and disability from our Title VI policy statement. Age and disability, obviously we can't discriminate related to age and disability, but those are under different laws than Title VI. So Title VI is very specific to race, color, and national origin being the protected classes under Title VI. So a Title VI policy statement, which we are required to do, needs to be specific to the classes that are protected under Title VI. So we had to tweak a little bit of the language there. We needed to add instructions for how people could file a civil rights complaint or a Title VI complaint directly with the FTA Office of Civil Rights. So we had a specific address that we needed to put in our Title VI complaint form and our Title VI complaint procedures and our Title VI policy notice to ensure that the public is aware that if they have any civil rights complaints, they can file those with FTA Civil Rights Office directly. Next was updating the demographic profile with more recent data, in this case data from the American Community Survey, which is a survey product of the US Census, and I'll walk through some of those highlights in a moment. Updating the list of subrecipients that the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission has. So we do have some additional subrecipients from our Section 5310 Elderly and Disabled Transit Program. So we now, for instance, Rockingham Nutrition Meals on Wheels is a new subrecipient of the commission this year, and we needed to make sure that all of our subrecipients are up to date and reflected in our Title VI program. And then lastly, updating our membership list for TAC and MPO members in the Appendix D of the Title VI program document. So As part of the process I just mentioned, we updated our demographic profile of the region. This is a map that shows minority population for the region. So across the entire region, we've got 13% of the population for the entire region is minority residents. And then we have what are called minority concentration areas that are, so that average is exceeded in one census tract in the town of Derry, which is in kind of the northwestern corner of the town of Derry, as well as 25 different census tracts in the city of Manchester, as well as the city of Manchester as a whole. So we needed to review where our long-range transportation projects are programmed around the region and make sure that there isn't any disproportionate share of benefits or impacts from our transportation projects that are in our long-range plan. You can see that plotted on this particular map, and if you look in detail in the actual Title VI program document, you can see that analysis as well. We did not find that any minority population areas within the region were subject to disproportionate impacts from the way that projects are programmed around the region. So that was a good result. On low-income populations, this map shows low-income populations around the region, low-income being below the poverty line. So approximately 8.5% of the population in the region lives below the poverty line. And that average is exceeded in 4 census tracts in the town of Derry, which basically make up kind of the western half of the town of Derry. 1 census tract in the town of Goffstown, which is in kind of the southeast corner of the town of Goffstown, and 21 census tracts in the city of Manchester. So we did the same type of analysis where we overlaid locations for long-range plan projects and looked to see if there was a disproportionate share of benefits or impacts from our long-range plan projects in low-income population areas. And fortunately, we did not see anything jump out as having as areas having a disproportionate share of impacts in low-income areas. So that was another welcome result of the way that long-range plan projects are programmed in the region. One of the big emphasis areas in updating our Title VI program is looking at limited English proficiency populations. What the acronym there is LEP populations, but limited English proficiency is defined pretty much as you think it would be defined, which is individuals who do not speak English as their primary language and who have a limited ability to read, speak, write, or understand English. So as we crunch the numbers around the region, about 4.2% of the population of the region is identified as having limited English proficiency. And the biggest single category within that is the Spanish-speaking LEP population. So within the region, 1.3% of the population, approximately 3,542 people, are Spanish-speaking limited English proficiency population. And that particular number is important because it's above a certain threshold that matters. So the threshold in this case is 1,000 individuals. So whenever there is a particular limited English proficiency group that exceeds 1,000 individuals, that means that there are some special considerations that need to be applied to that particular group. And the way that we need to do that is by developing what's called a language assistance plan. So the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission, as a follow-up item from our Title VI program update, is going to need to develop a language assistance plan to meet federal requirements. And that language assistance plan is going to obviously be specifically focused on the Spanish-speaking population, but will have effect on all of our limited English proficiency population groups, but with a specific focus on Spanish. So some of the things that we're likely to end up needing to do as part of that language assistance plan is to translate some of our key documents and products and public notices into Spanish, as well as ensuring, as Carl talked about, with the public involvement plan, retaining a translation service to provide accommodations as needed for LEP persons in the region. So we need to make sure that we are prepared if somebody walks into our office or calls our office who only speaks Spanish, who has a question or needs information about our TIP or our long-range plan or any other planning product in the region. We need to make sure that we're ready, that we have at the ready a translation service as necessary to answer those questions and provide the information that they may need. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. Many of the comments that we received or from the review were pretty straightforward to implement, but this language assistance plan will be probably the most significant item that will be coming out of our Title VI program update. And I'm going to be talking with our staff at our staff meeting tomorrow morning about what goes into a language assistance plan and developing a staffing plan for making that happen. So you should see a language assistance plan draft in the next couple of months. That will be kind of a follow-up item from the Title VI program update. I know many of you we don't need to make any decisions today about this. Obviously, the MPO will have an additional opportunity to provide comments at a public hearing at our September meeting. So, between now and then, please take the opportunity to read through the document and let us know if you have any questions or comments, and we'll make sure that everybody has another chance to provide final feedback when you consider adoption at the September 22nd meeting. So that's it in a nutshell, with kind of summarizing our Title VI program update, and I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
I have a question.
Yes.
Which dialect are you going to use for the Spanish? Latino or Mexican, or do you have to choose a particular dialect?
That is an excellent question, John, and I honestly don't know the answer to that. Or that will be some homework that we'll need to do as part of the language assistance plan process, and talk with translators about which is most appropriate for our region.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
Nate, if I could just ask, under the language assistance plan, do we need to do anything with our website to have any of that in Spanish?
Fortunately, in our most recent website update, we did add capability. So there, if you go on our website at the bottom, there's a little Google Translate widget incorporated in the bottom, and you can drag and pull down whatever language, and the Google Translate widget will actually translate our website into whatever language you select, and it's a pretty handy tool, but that really helps us on the website and meet our language responsibilities.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions on the Title VI program?
All right, well, thank you, Nate.
All right, thank you very much.
Moving on, the MPO prospectus update. James?
Resume share. Oh, stop share. Just a second here. Can everyone see my screen? It's a picture of the city of Manchester in the background that says 2020 MPO prospectus update.
You got it.
Great. Thank you. My name is James Baio. I'm the project manager for Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission, for those of you who are new to the commission. And I have a very brief preview of a document that will be coming before the MPO in the coming months. And this will not take very long, just a couple slides to bring the MPO policy committee up to date on something called a prospectus for the MPO. So what is a prospectus? Well, Merriam-Webster says a prospectus is a statement that forecasts the course or nature of something. Pretty broad and generic, doesn't really tell us much about what a prospectus is in terms of what we do as an MPO. But that is in itself really what the prospectus is. It's a general document that lays out the nature of the work that our MPO is responsible for. And so if you look at the prospectus in the context of transportation planning jargon, the prospectus has the following functions. The prospectus is an overview of the federally mandated 3 C's, and that stands for continuous, cooperative, and comprehensive planning. And this is language straight out of sort of federal regulation, federal speak. What that does is really says that us as an MPO, as a metropolitan planning organization, should work continuously to update our programs, cooperatively with other organizations, and in a way that includes as many factors in planning as possible. That's the comprehensive part. The prospectus defines the roles and responsibilities of the MPO, as well as the agencies and entities involved in planning. So on a state level, that's other MPOs and that abut our region. That's New Hampshire Department of Transportation and the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. And that's at the state level. And then it has another layer to the onion, so to speak. And that goes out to the Federal Highway Administration, the Environmental Protection Administration, and then the Federal Transit Administration. This document, the prospectus, is also a key place to share with the public interagency agreements used in the process used for decision making. So for example, we have this policy committee of all of you who make decisions about planning documents. And as part of that, you guys have a set of rules that you operate by, bylaws. And so those bylaws get published as an appendix within the prospectus. The same thing for the Transportation Advisory Committee. And so all those things get documented here. So the prospectus hasn't been updated since 2011, which is quite a while. We've been through 4 10-year planning cycles at the state level since this prospectus was last adopted, and nearly a decade ago. Since this prospectus was written in 2011, I have a spelling error on here. I meant to say prior surface transportation federal funding authorization was replaced by the FAST Act in 2016. So we have new federal authorization for transportation funding that was passed in 2016. We've updated the long range transportation plan in 2016, and we're also working on a 2020 update as we speak. We've also had changes in the scope of area that makes up the MPO. So we've lost Raymond as a municipality, but we've gained Francistown and Wyndham. And so the planning area has changed for our commission. There's also been changes in transit providers. We used to have 2 separate transit providers in Manchester Transit Authority and CART, and there's been changes in the structure of those organizations. And then finally, we on a regular basis or periodically have been updating the memorandum of understanding between other MPOs that abut our area, Concord, New Hampshire Regional Planning Commission, because a small portion of their regional planning area is within our urbanized area. And I won't get into all the details about that. If you're really interested in understanding all that, I encourage you to read the prospectus when we publish it for public comment, or you can read the existing 2011 document, which also explains a little bit about it, the UZA. and then the Nashua area, urban planning area as well. And so all these things have had some form of change over the last 10 years. And so by updating the prospectus, we can incorporate all those changes into the document. Ironically enough, the FAST Act will be is coming to a close pretty soon, and so we're not sure what will happen at the federal level. We may end up updating this document once again in a year or two once a new federal Transportation Act is passed. That's a little bit of a side note, but something to keep in mind. We'll update this now. We may again update it shortly due to changes at the federal level. Timeline for this update. As of today, staff, myself, Nate, others in the office are working on updating this document to reflect current organizational structure and also to be a lot more pleasing to use. The old document did not include a lot of reference to these documents as living documents. And we've modified, we recently updated the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission's webpage, which makes it very easy to find all these living documents that the MPO is responsible for. And so we're gonna link to each one of these living documents from our webpage in the prospectus. So it'll be really easy for people to find the documents that are being referenced. In September of 2020, we'll release the prospectus for public comment. And so we'll be asking anyone from the public that has input about this to provide that following our public participation process. And then at the October 27th meeting of the MPO, we'll have a public hearing in which we'll ask the MPO to take action, obviously to adopt this with or without changes. Next steps, the staff, myself, Nate, others in the office will be updating. We really covered this already. We'll be updating the prospectus to reflect changes in regulation, planning area, different towns, right? Planning products, because we're constantly updating the long-range transportation plan, the transportation improvement plan, things like our public participation plan and our Title VI, which you've heard about today. And so, as these documents get renewed, we'll include some of the changes in context of those documents in the language of the prospectus, as well as partnering agencies that we work with, partnering MPOs, Department of Environmental Services, New Hampshire Department of Transportation. That's my quick presentation. I'm all done. I'm happy to answer any questions people may have about this prospectus document, if any. Hearing none.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. All right, we have a motion to adjourn the MPO.
Oliver moves to adjourn.
Adjournment.
Second.
2 seconds.
Who was the second?
Andrew.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Andrew. I'm not doing a roll call for the adjournment. Everybody says yeah.
Yes.
Aye.
All right.
Everybody good? Thumbs up all the way around. I see Barbara's thumbs up. Mike, thank you. I like the thumbs. Thank you, David. 2 thumbs up. Fantastic.
Right. Thank you, everyone. So let's call to order the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. And first item will be the meeting minutes of July 28th, 2020.
Hey,
We have a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved, Peter Griffin.
David Pierce, second.
Brian Lord.
all right, I'll do the roll call. Bill Herman, Auburn.
Abstain.
Bedford, Bill DeShaco.
Yes.
Charlie in Bedford?
No, abstain.
All right. Bill Jean in Bedford?
Bill Jean, abstain.
Barbara?
Yes.
Thank you. Candia, Al Hall?
Al Hall abstains.
Thank you. Dick Snell?
Aye.
Thanks, Dick. Loud and clear. Chester Andrew Haddock?
Yes.
Wonderful. Deb Munson?
Yes.
Thank you. Deerfield Bob?
Yes.
Al.
Sorry.
And Derry, we have Jeff
Yes.
and John.
Yes.
Thank you. Francistown Alfred?
Yes.
Patrick?
Abstain.
Oh, I forgot Bedford Brian Lord again. Goodness.
I was going to wait for Pete to stick up for me, but yes.
Thank you. I caught myself. I'm improving somewhat. Goffstown, David.
Vote yes.
And Hooksett Cutler.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
Thank you, Mark. Londonderry, Suzanne.
Abstain.
Thank you. Deborah
Yes.
and her bugs. And Art.
Yes.
Thanks, Art. Pete Manchester.
Yes.
Dan O'Neill.
Dan O'Neill, yes.
Thank you. Tom.
No, let me correct. Dan O'Neill abstain. I'm sorry.
Okay, not a problem. We have in Ware, Tom,
Abstain.
and in Wyndham, Peter.
Yes.
Okay, great.
So last item on the agenda is the Coastal New Hampshire Climate Change Adoption and Resilience. Julie.
All right, we're lucky enough to have Julie LaBranche from Rockingham Planning Commission. This is sort of an ongoing resilience and sort of energy and I don't know, sort of that category. We started with our vulnerability assessment. Last time we had Sherry Godlowski from DES talk about resilience, and I asked Julie LaBranche from RPC, who's doing a lot with climate change and her coastal communities. So take it away, Julie.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for having me today as a speaker. Nice to see some familiar faces. Sylvia, of course, Carl, Nate, and Dick Snow. Hi, big shout out, SWA, Southeast Watershed Alliance. So I'm going to share my screen, see if I can get this going here. Does everyone see a full page screen of my presentation?
We do.
Okay. I need to I'm seeing a band of people on the right of little snapshots of people, and I wonder if it's going to interfere with my.
It doesn't. We all control our own, and you can minimize that by.
Yeah, I want to hide the thumbnail video. Okay, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, and everyone else, you can also hide your thumbnail of people by just either making it all the way to the left, or you can show Julie by going to the second to the left, little one bar. So.
No, I'm good. I just hit everybody for now. Well, great. Thank you so much for having me today. And as we move forward in the presentation, I want you to be aware that this is a very coastal centric presentation. But as part of our work with the Rockingham Planning Commission and also in partnership with Stratford Regional Planning Commission, we often will translate the methodologies that we use in our coastal communities to our inland coastal communities with respect to climate adaptation and resiliency. And I'll try and point out examples of when and how we do that as I move forward with the presentation. Recognizing that, see, we have 27 communities in the RPC region and only let's see, 15 of them are actually inland. They're not coastal at all. And for Stratford, I believe 14 out of their 19 are also not coastal. So we have a lot of territory and a lot of municipalities that don't share the same sorts of issues and stresses that coastal communities do. But again, certainly they can learn from the lessons that the coastal communities have been learning over the years as they go forward with implementation of adaptation and resilience planning. So the presentation is sort of broken up into several different parts. Basically, the major funding programs that have happened over the last, I want to say 6 years or so. No, actually longer than that, more like 7 years. It's the Tides to Storms project, which was the first coastal vulnerability assessment for New Hampshire. Tides to Storms 2, which was a follow-on implementation program. Then we followed up with Climate Risk in the Seacoast, which was basically taking the methodology from Tides to Storms and applying it to the 12 inland coastal communities, whereas Tides to Storms focused on only the 7 Atlantic coast communities. And then the New Hampshire Setting Sail project, which was a follow-on to the coastal risk in the seacoast, and really was precipitated by the report from the New Hampshire Coastal Risks and Hazards Commission and implementing their recommendations. And their report came out in 2016. So I'll go through each one of these in a little bit more detail. So again, we have 17 coastal communities between the RPC and SRPC regions. 10 inland and 7 coastal. These are the inland communities, and the remainder are the 7 Atlantic coast communities. So the Atlantic coast communities are, we have this Hampton Seabrook estuary to the south, and then we have the tidal inlet of Piscataqua River to the north in Portsmouth, Newcastle, and Rye. And then the inland communities really are the communities that are head of tide and that border the Great Bay. So just some themes to keep in mind that you'll hear kind of again and again as I talk about the different projects that we worked on, is that heavy engagement with our local decision makers was always at the forefront of all the projects that we worked on. A lot of these, I think these projects in totality actually really created a level playing field and uniform products and tools, and transcended municipal boundaries in their scope and in their consideration. So having every community having the same types of information and detailed information was really important, especially when we think about things like planning for the Great Bay watershed and other watershed-based and river-based activities. And that the products that we produced for each one of the projects were customized, and they had definitely a local voice incorporated into them. And the other important part was the technical assistance funding that we received primarily through NOAA, and some of it coming directly from NOAA through what are called projects of special merit, which are solicited every 1 to 2 years from the federal government. And then also coastal funds from NOAA being translated to us through competitive grant rounds through the New Hampshire Coastal Program. We every time we go to a venue or a meeting where we have our federal funders present, we always thank them for the assistance that they've provided to New Hampshire, which has been in the millions of dollars actually over the last, I'd say 8 years or so. And then just the idea that a lot of the communities, as we worked with them through these projects, they were taking their first steps towards implementation, and sometimes just their first steps towards discussion about surrounding the issues of climate adaptation and resilience. So moving forward, just a quick description of the Tides to Storms vulnerability assessment. This was an RPC project, and we worked with our 7 coastal communities, so that's from Portsmouth down to Seabrook along the Atlantic coast. And because of our level of funding, this was a FEMA funded project through New Hampshire Homeland Security and Emergency Management, sort of a pilot project, the first of its kind in New Hampshire actually. And so we decided, given our limited capacity and our limited funding, that we would target municipal decision makers as our audience for the project and for the products. We, of course, would have liked to have had money. We actually did have money in the project to do a fairly hefty outreach component to the project, but our budget was reduced, so we had to eliminate that particular action item. So we met with small groups of decision makers, and for most communities, it was either anywhere between 8 to 12 people in a room. We met with each town at least twice, sometimes up to 4 times. Usually the meetings lasted for 2 hours. And what that showed us was that each of these communities had a vested interest and a real commitment, a demonstrated commitment to actually understanding the science, understanding the mapping and the data, and wanting to take that information and incorporate it into their decision-making process. So there was a lot of staff hours that were dedicated in each community towards participating in this project. As a result of that, we built strong relationships, even stronger relationships with between our communities and us as the technical assistance provider. And they came to see us as a trusted source of climate science, where we were gleaning science from the University of New Hampshire, from the National Climate Assessment, and other local climate assessments that had been completed through Cameron Wake from the University of New Hampshire. So they trusted that the information was local and that it was accurate. And again, those products and tools were customized to address local impacts and to incorporate local concerns and priorities. We have since done quite a bit of outreach to many different stakeholder groups in the region as using the reports and the maps that came out of this project. What every community received was a customized report and a series of maps. I think there were maybe 12 maps, I think, in each community. And then we actually created a compiled regional assessment that compiled all the data from all the towns together into a regional report. And one thing to excuse me, to stress is that this was a locally driven process. We came in, we knew the scope of the sort of the technical components of our project, what they would be, like maps and data and reports and things like that. But the content was really driven by discussions and contributions from the local decision makers. And as a result of this project, I think that the communities ended up at the other side of a process where they felt very uncomfortable, well, I would say very, somewhat uncomfortable with the kinds of data we were looking at, sea level rise curves and, and climate projections and data that they may not have been all that familiar with. And by the time we finished the project, they were able to sit down with the sea level rise curves and understand and be able to describe them to somebody else and to explain what they meant. And so there was a lot of capacity building, and I think a lot of forward momentum in a positive way. We didn't go into these small group discussions with it's sort of a doom and gloom sort of mentality. What we wanted to do was embolden them and to equip them with tools that they needed to successfully make good decisions about how to manage their community and planning and how to invest in infrastructure and other community investments. So we wanted it to be a positive, and instead of rather it being sort of a negative that all is lost sort of scenario. So following on the Tides to Storms project, we received a small grant from the Gulf of Maine Council to do some adaptation and resilience projects for each one of those 7 Atlantic coast communities. And it was, I think we had about maybe $7,000 per community to work with. And so we went back into the communities, and as part of it, we resurrected the Tides to Storms report and referred them to the recommendations in that report that were in that report, and asked them to prioritize what they would like to work on as part of this technical assistance grant. So this would provide them with technical assistance from RPC staff, from planners, GIS support, and others at the RPC. And so each community selected what they wanted to work on. And I think that the interesting part of this is that when we came out of the Tides to Storms project, there was a real, I wouldn't say an aha moment, because we already knew this intuitively, that some communities are heavily impacted, like Seabrook, Rye, Hampton, parts of Portsmouth. And other communities like Northampton and Hampton Falls have less actual coastline, and they have topography that protects them from a lot of coastal flooding and hazards and things. So we weren't surprised to see the spread of different types of projects that each community actually selected. Some communities decided to do ordinance changes, like updating their floodplain ordinances. Others decided to do outreach to the communities, to the highly affected areas that actually were, and most of those were residential areas. And some decided to do sort of hybrid approaches of looking at incorporating a coastal hazards and climate adaptation chapter into their master plan. And Rye and Seabrook were the two communities that actually opted for that. So again, it was we came out of this project with the communities feeling positive and I think hopeful that they were making progress and moving things forward in their community. So that whole idea of capacity building was huge. We did do some community engagement as part of the outreach projects and as part of the master plan chapters that we developed. So that community engagement that was left out of the Tides to Storms 1 project was brought forward for the Tides to Storms 2 phase. So moving ahead, RPC did a lot of presentations about this project to the New Hampshire Coastal Adaptation Work Group and to the Coastal Risks and Hazards Commission and to other groups. And we partnered again with the Coastal Program and Stratford Regional Planning Commission to apply for additional funding through NOAA to duplicate and replicate this process of Tides to Storms 1 and 2 to the 12 inland coastal communities. So that brought us to, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot I had another slide. So here's just a list of what each community decided to do. I think I mentioned a couple already. Portsmouth decided to look at an audit of their zoning and building strategies and salt marsh protection, and that produced a report. Newcastle focused on wetland buffers as part of their community outreach. And let's see, Northampton actually did some ordinance changes to their wetland buffer zoning ordinance. And then I think I already talked about the others on the slide. So moving forward, we were successful in getting another grant from as a project of special merit through NOAA to take that technology or that methodology from Tides to Storms and translate it to the coastal communities and along Great Bay and the inland head of tide communities, which goes all the way from Dover, Durham, Rollinsford, little tiny slice of Madbury, and obviously Newmarket too, and Exeter, Greenland, Stratham, Newington. So we kind of used the same methodology that we did in Tides to Storms. We mapped 3 sea level rise scenarios and also the sea level rise scenarios plus the 100-year storm surge on top of those maps. We mapped infrastructure, we mapped natural resources, roads, culverts, critical facilities, and other high hazard facilities that may be impacted, things like nursing homes, daycares, and things like that. So this is an example of one of the maps we produced. It's a little hard to see at this scale, but this is just an, oh, I know, so this is just an example of the table that's at the bottom of these maps, and it just goes and shows each one of the categories of infrastructure that were mapped and the number of facilities actually that were impacted. So part of this project, which expanded upon the Tides to Storms effort, is that we actually did a climate ready culvert analysis. So we had each community look at and select 10 priority culverts based on the mapping that we did. Like what, and we kind of looked at 2 different categories. Basically, which culverts they already know were having problems with, and if they were to be inundated further and at greater levels, they would probably fail. And then the other category was there a freshwater culvert that in the future would be impacted by sea level rise and become tidally influenced? So we had them look at those 2 different categories to select their 10 culverts to be analyzed. And UNH actually did the analysis on the culverts for us, and it included aquatic organism passage and hydraulic flow capacity analysis as part of each one of those. This is just a key for the maps. We color coded everything and customized the symbology and everything to make it easier to read. So moving ahead, we're on to our second sort of our follow-on to the coastal risk in the seacoast, our Sea Rise project, and that is setting sail. And that was again a technical assistance grant through the Project of Special Merit through NOAA for communities to actually solicit and propose projects for implementation. And SAIL actually is an acronym that came out of the Coastal Risks and Hazards Commission's report. report was divided into four main sections of the body of the report. And its SAIL stands for science, adaptation, implementation, and legislation. And so the three major categories that we actually funded as part of the project were education and outreach, presentations and community outreach, municipal assessments and implementation, and state coordination, assessment, and implementation when it was necessary. I have some examples of what communities did. We had a number of climate adaptation and climate change master plan chapters. Durham actually did a coastal flood hazard overlay district, which is very interesting, and it's very transferable to inland communities using their FEMA floodplain as a guide, and looking at projections of how the current floodplain may actually increase as a result of increased precipitation and more runoff and impervious surface being built in our local watersheds. So the methodology, even though they were using sea level rise, you could actually use, inland coastal, and I think they actually, Stratford Regional Planning Commission actually translated that methodology to the town of Lee, where they actually did map an extended flood hazard area in their freshwater floodplains. Some towns did emergency preparedness workshops. Newmarket updated their stormwater management regulations and their site plan review and subdivision regulations. And Rollinsford actually submitted paperwork to apply for a hazard mitigation funding grant. I'm going to kind of breeze through this one just because it's a little bit detailed, and I'm not sure it's going to give you much more detail here. This was interesting in Madbury. Madbury has a very small amount of coastline, but they, as more of an inland coastal community, were more interested in weather-related changes. So how does extreme precipitation and flooding and drought and water supply affect their community as climate change, and how would they adapt and become more resilient to those changes? So this case study would actually be very transferable to inland coastal communities as an example of climate adaptation and resilience planning. Again, Newmarket did stormwater regulations. They've had a tremendous amount of flooding and road damage and culvert damage over the years associated with the Lamprey River. And they've actually received a couple of grants since this initiative happened to replace a couple of culverts. The Lumberland Creek area, I guess, they did some watershed modeling to see where is water coming from, where is it going, and how can we disconnect runoff and reduce our flood threats basically and impacts. Rollinsford's letter of intent to replace a culvert on Sligo Road. And in the RPC region, our projects were Exeter. We sort of did a climate change sort of community outreach program, and we worked on their stormwater regulations. We did an open house for Exeter. It was in the middle of the winter. I think it was February. We had a great turnout, and it was sort of like you had different stations with different activities and different pieces of information and different groups represented. Greenland, Newington, and Stratham all did master plan coastal hazards chapters for their master plan. I'm sorry, Newington did not. I'm sorry. Greenland and Stratham did the actual coastal hazards chapters. Stratham focused heavily on agriculture because they have a number of very large farms and smaller farms in their community, and they wanted to, one of their primary goals of their master plan is to really focus on how to keep the rural character of Stratham and the agricultural activities in the community going over time. In Newington, they were in the process of starting to update their entire master plan. So what we did was we went through and we developed climate adaptation and resilience modules for each one of their topical chapters of their master plan. So transportation, infrastructure, natural resources, land use, they all had content that was developed so that when the master plan was actually updated, they could just add that material to it. And we also did business outreach along the Piscataqua River. We met with 5 different businesses, including Sprague Energy, the Newington Boat Club, and others to talk about what the maps were showing as impacts that could happen in the future to their properties. just an example of each one of those case studies again. So this is our flyer for our open house for the Climate Change and Adaptation Resilience Open House. And we did update the stormwater regulations based on the Southeast Watershed Alliance model that that myself and Jamie Houle at the UNH Stormwater Center developed a number of years ago for the Southeast Watershed Alliance. One thing that was actually added, which kind of came around at about the same time that Durham was doing their flood hazard overlay district, which is an advisory district, it's not regulatory. Exeter actually adopted in their land use regulations the requirement for any development that's located within the high flood hazard areas shown on the sea rise maps, the coastal risk and seacoast sea rise maps, that they actually put that information on their site development plans and account for it in their site design. So that was that was one of the first communities to actually require that the climate information from those reports be used as a regulatory tool. Since then, RIE has updated, I worked with RIE the last year and a half to update their land use regulations and land development regulations, and they adopted the same sort of methodology, basically, that if you're in those high risk areas, that you have to show that the flood extents for the sea level rise projections on your plan and account for them in your site design. Again, Greenland's master plan. They actually were very, very interested in Greenland and their conservation lands and how they could actually, I think, capitalize on land conservation as a way to provide more adaptation resilience along their coastal areas. So putting in easements, buying pieces of land to be able to allow for things like marsh migration and for, habitat conversions over time as sea level rises, up into the future. So that was that was their focus for their coastal hazards chapter, was land conservation. And Newington, I think I already talked to you about what we did in Newington as far as the business outreach. And we also did coordinate this project, not only with their master plan and the business outreach, but also with the update of their hazard mitigation plan. So the information from the Sea Rise project actually was included as part of the hazard mitigation plan. And actually that happened with a number of our communities that we were already in the update process. I think Portsmouth, Rye, Hampton, Seabrook, I think Northampton, and maybe Hampton Falls as well, all incorporated the sea level rise and storm surge projections into their hazard mitigation plans. I think I already talked about Stratham with their focus on farms and community water systems that are at high risk for flood. They have a lot of condo developments that actually could potentially have problems with their wells over time. And sort of getting to the end here, one of the sort of the newer funding sources that has come into play here, NOAA has provided the New Hampshire Coastal Program with money to develop a resilience grant program. And we're awarded the third round of funding this year, and the funds actually can be used for 3 different things: for project planning and implementation, so a culvert replacement, or I know Seabrook actually received one last year, and they did a detailed engineering vulnerability assessment for their wastewater treatment plant, which is right on the edge of the marsh. And we can also be eligible for municipal and community planning, so things like master planning, hazard mitigation planning enhancements, other types of planning like open space planning, land conservation planning, land use planning. And then capacity building and outreach, any kind of community-based, stakeholder-driven or stakeholder inclusion process for reaching out about the topics of climate adaptation and resilience. So last year, RPC was awarded a grant to do a Seacoast Transportation Corridor Vulnerability Assessment. It's quite a mouthful. And so what we're doing is we're running our transportation demand model, and we are putting in all the flood data from our sea level rise projections and running the model to see where basically the links break and where the roads become non-functional, and then trying to find where traffic would be rerouted if certain road segments were flooded. And so we're in the process of working on that project now, where we are partnered with the Coastal Program, with the New Hampshire DOT, and also with researchers from the University of New Hampshire who will help us develop adaptation strategies for a select list of priority sites across the seacoast. We did just we just submitted for another round, so waiting to hear if we receive another grant. We had actually proposed to develop a coastal innovative land use guide for New Hampshire. So we'll see what happens with that. So these resilience grants have been awarded to Dover, to Durham, I believe, so Seabrook, the RPCs, and I'm trying to remember who else, Hampton, to do master planning. So the money has really, I think, helped communities take that next step towards a more sophisticated implementation and sophisticated planning than when we first started out with our Tides to Storm and our Sea Rise projects. So I can't stress enough how this kind of funding is actually so important for building capacity in our communities. And I think the equivalent, I'm not sure equivalent, but another, translatable source for inland communities would be the hazard mitigation planning grants that HSEM and FEMA actually offer. And they've changed their program now to be the BRIC program, BRIC, I believe. I'm not Building Resilience in Communities, something like that acronym, and that's their new funding program. So it'd be a good idea to look into those if you haven't already, or tried to apply for one in the past. So kind of translating some of this coastal stuff into less coastal stuff. So, and when we're looking at the coast, one of our prime priorities is looking at future sea level rise and storm surge. However, these coastal communities have a double whammy, that they're not only looking at coastal flooding, but they look at flooding from precipitation in inland areas. So they look at access for first responders as part of their hazard mitigation planning. We're also subject in the coast to saltwater intrusion for drinking water due to sea level rise and groundwater rise, loss of habitat and habitat degradation, including anything from land-based wildlife to aquatic resources as well. Looking at road availability and damage during flood events, and things like substation failures and pump station failures, and for drinking water and wastewater, that sort of critical infrastructure that really needs some detailed planning. And that holds true for that type of infrastructure that's also in freshwater floodplains too. I know that I remember, I think it was Somersworth that had to completely revamped their one of their drinking water substation pump stations, and waterproofed it and floodproofed it basically, and elevated their generator and waterproofed the structure, and elevated key pieces of equipment inside of the structure after experiencing repeated floods at that particular location.
Julie, we have a few minutes for questions. I don't know if you've got time for questions.
Sure. Yeah. I just have to. I'm just going to take 30 seconds more to go through my last of my slides, and I just want to say that we made forward progress, but there were lots of hurdles. Things, challenges, barriers, successes, being flexible. Being able to accept a different or envision a different future than what we have today. Our community has benefited hugely, and I think I went through a lot of this stuff, like capacity building, collaboration, regional understanding, state awareness, and then all the things that we learned along the way. And I think I went through a lot of those things as I was giving my presentation, the transferability, and looking through the climate lens for all the decisions that communities make with respect to this level and type of planning.
Thank you so much. Any questions from the group?
Sylvia, it's Peter. I do have a question.
Yes.
Sylvia, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Julie, thank you for your great presentation. Just a couple of thoughts and questions. It's more than just environmental that's happening here, but it's also economic. Do you know if the state, say, Department of Tourism has gone forward with their own study process to identify what the effect of tourism is going to be on coastal flooding? what the Board of Realtors might be doing in your area to address this issue and what the effect of property values might be? And also, have you had communication with Merrimack Valley Planning Commission in Haverhill and Southern Maine Regional Planning?
We have had communicated with Southern Maine Planning Commission, but not Merrimack yet. And as far as your other questions, those are things that are slated for hopefully future sources of funding. I have a feeling that a couple of those topics were may have been proposals for the current round of the New Hampshire Coastal Programs Resilience Grants, which we are trying to look at the effects of economics and tourism on. It's a little bit above what we do as a planning commission, but I think that we in the future we'll try and do some of that. The parks, you know, the parks departments and the agencies that manage them were given this information. They all have the maps, and we actually did put an interesting sign at Odeon State Park about sea level rise last year. So we are reaching out, and all those people in those entities you mentioned were represented on the Coastal Hazards Risks and Hazards Commission, and they participated heavily in the discussion and the need, and included recommendations for the need for more assessment moving forward for those very things. Recognizing that tourism in the seacoast area doesn't, you know, the revenue that's generated benefits the entire state. It doesn't just stay in the coastal region.
That's why I brought it up.
Every single community in the state benefits from the meals and rooms tax and other tourist related revenue for the state.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for Julie?
Hi, Sylvia. This is James Veo from the Regional Planning Commission here. I just want to make a quick shameless plug for our own vulnerability assessment for the region. If people are interested in that document, they can find it in the climate adaptation section of SNHPC's webpage. Hopefully some of the new members will have an opportunity to check that out, including an interactive map. And I just wanted to note that while we have very different climate impacts here inland than tidal storm surge, we relied heavily on the Tide to Storms project to guide our climate data and to guide our planning process for the vulnerability assessment. And I just wanted to say thank you, Julie. That document was incredibly resourceful for our own activity and allowed us to connect with Cameron Wake of the University in New Hampshire. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad it was useful.
Sylvia, would it be worthwhile for James or someone to review our own plan sometime in the future, a future meeting?
Well, James did actually just do a pretty substantial presentation on the vulnerability assessment in our region and reviewed the fantastic interactive map that he and Monique and Zach. Sorry, say it again.
I probably missed that one, but okay, thanks.
Yeah, but we can always do it again. Anyone else in the group missed that? Probably our new people.
Sylvia, not to interrupt again, but one of the things we did that people might like to check out is we put together, it's one of our first, but we put together a really nice 20-minute PowerPoint presentation video, which you can view from our YouTube page. And you can also find a link to the video on our webpage. So if you missed that presentation and you want sort of the 20-minute primer on the work of the vulnerability assessment, I highly recommend checking out the video. And I will provide the link to the video to Linda to put into the meeting minutes for this MPO meeting.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's perfect. It really is helpful to see that video. All right, I think that's it for us. I see we hit that 1 o'clock mark.
Right.
So thank you so much, Julie. That was great.
Thank you.
Anything else, Sylvia? Insights, comments?
I don't think so. Linda, anything I'm forgetting?
Great. Do we have any motion to adjourn?
I'll make that.
That was Peter Capano,
Second.
and that was Bill DeShenko.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right. All thumbs up on that?
Aye.
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 All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you next month, if not sooner.